Welcome back to the Gold Newsletter channel. Welcome back to Soar Financially as well. My name is Kai Hoffmann. I'm your host. I'm the @JR Mining Guy on Twitter, and of course, the CEO of the Soar Financially Group. Thanks so much for joining us for this company introduction. It's a company that says that has a clear pathway to cash flow. We're going to explain, of course, and explore how they're going to get to that and reach that massive milestone. The company's Maritime Resources, a company I've been associated and known for years, actually a shareholder as well. So take that with everything I say, of course, with a grain of salt. And of course, we're getting compensated for the interview here as well. So please keep that in mind. But the company is close to my heart. A lot of my friends bought into Maritime Resources as well. So I want it to be a success because my name is on the line. My reputation is on the line here as well. So I want to make sure everything goes well. And to have that discussion, I invited the president and CEO, Garett Macdonald, onto the program here to sort of explain the clear pathway to cash flow and what the next few steps are here, of course, as well. Garett, as always, it's great to see you. Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks, Guy. Good to see you.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, let's dive right in. It's the first time you're on Gold Newsletter here, our new channel together with Brien Lundin. So I think we need to start with a bit of a 35-foot overview of the company, and then we'll dive into some specifics here.
Yeah, sure. So Maritime is a Canadian exploration and development company. We're focused on gold and VMS deposits in Newfoundland and Labrador. So we've been working on this project called Hammerdown for the last few years. So Hammerdown is our main asset. It's a former high-grade operating mine. It was run by Richmont back in the early 2000s. So it was a small underground mine with an average grade of about a half an ounce, so 15 to 16 grams per ton. It ran for about 4 years. They moved on after that. The ore was processed at the Nugget Pond gold mill, about 140 kilometers away. So basically, since that time, the Hammerdown area has been dormant. They reclaimed the mine, they shut it down and walked away. They operated back then at $300 an ounce with an 8.5 gram cutoff grade. And fast forward to today, we've got a resource there of about 360,000 ounces. We were looking at it as a high-grade open pit. Selective mining of these high-grade narrow veins. We have an idea as well to look at some ore sorting to reject the dilution before we send it to the mill. And speaking of mills, we own the only two gold mills in Newfoundland at the moment. Marathon will be building the third one here shortly. So all of this has, I guess, been our strategy from the get-go to start with what we have, use existing resources, existing infrastructure, try to get to cash flow sooner than later with low capital, low risk. We've taken Hammerdown through an environmental assessment already. We're going to have it fully permitted here early next year. We've been through a feasibility study on Hammerdown already, 2022, during the time of very high inflation and numbers changing. Later this, or about August of this year, we concluded a deal with Signal Gold to acquire the Point Rousse project, which included the fully permitted Pine Cove mill. So we've assembled a number of very good assets in a great jurisdiction that we think are able to come together very soon and get that cash flow generated and started. And that will help us grow the company going forward.
Fantastic. Oh, excellent summary there, Garett. Sounds like you've done this before. And interesting. Why would you start with the only two gold mills in Newfoundland? Really, really interesting approach. How did it get to that point, and why are there only two?
Well, we started with, I guess, historically in the Bayverde mining district, there's a number of gold VMS deposits in that area. This, high concentration of deposits up there. So the Hammerdown project, we started looking around at ways we could de-risk the project. Good grade. Mills are expensive. Go and try and build a mill today, and you'll be shocked at the capital cost. It's extremely expensive. We are on an island as well. Everything has to be shipped in. So we looked around, and there was a gold facility called Nugget Pond, about 140 kilometers away at the existing Nugget Pond mill. So the gold circuit was not being used. It was idle since, I believe, 2013. We bought that from Rambler Metals and Mining, which later was acquired by Ateco. And, that was the original plant that produced gold, or I guess treated ore from Hammerdown to produce gold doré right on site. So that was the basis for our feasibility study after acquiring it. So we then had a high-grade open pit with a way to connect it to a processing plant that's already in place. We would have had to do some modifications to it, some additional capital, grinding circuit, to get it in operation for ourselves. So that's plan number one. The opportunity came up to acquire another mill, which is actually closer to our Hammerdown deposit, with a fully permitted large capacity tailings facility. It was good for 13 years in an old open pit that they had filled up. It had port infrastructure. There's a very interesting idea on that one. So we looked at the most recent one, the Point Rousse acquisition, not just because we like buying mills, but because there's a bigger story in play for Maritime and Point Rousse together. It came with some other gold deposits, some exploration potential. It's fantastic near mill. We'll call it not near mine exploration potential, near mill, which we really liked. And we liked the hub and spoke idea that we could create something in the Bayverde district that had a big central processing base with long life tailings, permits, the ability to ship mineralization in, concentrate out. Like, there's a lot of very cool things you could do there. Parts of the Nugget Pond circuit that we own, the gold plant, could actually be relocated and augmented into the Pine Cove mill to increase recoveries. So those were the only two plants in the Bayverde district. They're actually the only two gold plants on the island. Marathon Gold is under construction right now. They're building a large plant down there. That'll be running, I think, in early 2025. So at the moment, we do own the only two ones in Newfoundland.
Well, you mentioned you put out a feasibility study for Hammerdown. Obviously, that was geared towards feeding the Nugget Pond mill.
Yep.
Now you got Pine Cove, pretty much twice the capacity as well. How does that change the economics, and how does that change sort of the scope of the project? And would you need some additional feed maybe in there as well to sort of fill it? Because again, different scopes. I'm assuming there might be a bit of a tonnage gap or so.
Yeah. So Nugget Pond was the basis for our 2022 feasibility study. So it was really good, a good option for us. Pine Cove comes in as we think is a better option. We own the whole site, so we have complete ownership of the property. The mill has 1,300 tons a day of capacity. Hammerdown ore is actually a lot harder than what was processed there before. I mean, this mill was running, first quarter of 2023, it shut down. So it hasn't been idle very long. We've got a care and maintenance team on site taking good care of the facility. So as I mentioned, Hammerdown material is quite hard. Quartz veins, very high bond work index. So I don't think we can fully fill 1,300 tons a day, but it'll be full, 700, 800, 900 tons a day, at least going through that plant. What we're going to be looking at doing is some exploration in and around the mill and the mine. So the Pine Cove mine was the original mine there at site. There's good potential beneath the mine. There's some other exploration targets to the north and all around there. There's a gold deposit called Stoggertite, which is only 4 kilometers away from the Pine Cove mill. It's about 73,000 ounce resource. It needs a little more drilling and some understanding before we would draw it in. We do have some other targets around Hammerdown as well. The Orion deposit is one of them that needs a little more work on it before we can bring it into the mine plan. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that we have the basis now at Pine Cove. We have Hammerdown as the starter, and there are a number of other targets, very close and advanced targets, just around the mill. So what I'd like to do is update the study at a time when we can bring in some other feed. Okay. Now the Pine Cove mill is about 40 kilometers closer to Hammerdown than the Nugget Pond one. So there's, haulage costs are expensive. Fuel prices have not gone down anytime. They've only gone up. So there's a bit of a savings on haulage. Recoveries would be a little bit different with Pine Cove. It's a different style of mill than the other one. But as I mentioned, we're going to look at maybe moving some of the equipment from Nugget Pond to Pine Cove to try and build it up as to one good central hub, processing hub. So yeah, when the feasibility study is updated, it will try to include a number of those things to create one good, long-term story here. One of the, comments we get a lot about Hammerdown is that it's a great project, good grade, great location, and good economics, but it's about 5 years of mine life, and people always want to see, and so do I, what's past that. So if you're going to project finance something like that, you want a little bit longer mine life. We think we can get there with some exploration. There are a number of targets, like I said, around the mill, around Hammerdown and Pine Cove mines. So it's pretty exciting, actually. There's a lot of potential to put a good story together. Well, you think the capital cost could be lower to get started. Pine Cove, I said, was running back in March. So we don't have to do a lot to it, but we're looking at everything right now. And hopefully in the, probably later next year, we'll start looking at pulling all this together.
One question I like asking also is like in other meetings as well. It's like, so what's the budget to get to that next point? For you is a feasibility study on Pine Cove, and then of course the step after that is of course getting Pine Cove back into production with some Hammerdown feed and potentially some surrounding area feed. But run us through that step and like what do you need to get to that feasibility study in terms of like you mentioned you want to do some more exploration. Let's elaborate on that first, and then we'll talk about the other steps that you need to get or need to take off, sort of.
Yeah, we're looking at that right now. We've got our exploration teams running through the data we received from Signal Gold, specifically around the Point Roost project. There are some very good targets underneath the existing Pine Cove pit. For example, 3 grams, I think, over 36 meters. There's a historic intersection down there. The zone continues below the pit, which is interesting. We have another target, pretty high grade, actually, up north of the mill, about 8 kilometers away. It's called Deer Cove. I think the highlight intersection there is about 6.9 grams over 25 meters. So there's a few targets that look exceptional. These are open pit targets up to the north, which are good. So I think with a few thousand meters of diamond drilling that we'd like to do sometime in the new year, we can start to see if that's got any legs to then, get on to the next stage of a resource estimate up there. Back at Hammerdown's drilled off quite well. We've got a little more to do down at Orion, which is about 2 kilometers to the south. So between all of those, in the new year, we're going to look at starting an exploration program and starting to firm up those targets so they can hopefully come into the picture on the feasibility update.
Do you have a rough budget to get to that point? I know it's a bit of an unfair question. It's a moving target, but just ballpark.
Well, we'd probably like to do initially, a few thousand meters of diamond drilling up on these targets. Our average drilling cost, including assaying and everything, is about $170 a meter. Okay, so that's, you're looking at, probably maybe a couple $1 million program to get started right away. That's the scale of it. If we succeed and we see some things we like, we can look to expand that.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Let's. I think financing to the next step, I think, is key as well. You just recently completed a bigger financing package to acquire the Pine Cove Mill and the Point Roost project from Signal Gold. Where do you stand? Like, what does the balance sheet look like right now?
Yeah, so we did take on the 2 financings we did in August. We did a small equity raise of 1.8 million, I believe. We did a $5 million US debt facility with a number of companies, including Newfoundland Gold as the lead order on that one for $2 million US. Currently sitting right now just over $2 million in working capital. So one of the ideas we've been looking at recently here is to evaluate Hammerdown. Hammerdown has got some very high grade mineralization right at surface. So we do believe there's an option, I think, in the future to maybe as a startup potential or a startup option for Hammerdown to look at bringing some of that high grade to the Pine Cove mill and generating some cash flow early, and that will help us kind of bootstrap our way into the larger project.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, interesting. Like you mentioned Newfoundland Gold, of course, in there as well, but you also signed an MOU with Newfoundland Gold. I need to explore that a bit because that's an interesting tidbit, for lack of a better term. Like, what's the angle there with Newfoundland Gold? Of course, they have quite a bit of cash. They just raised $56 million flow through, I have to say. But they always have access to the capital market. So what's their plan? What's their idea?
Yeah, well, what we talked to them about, this is out in the news. It's the idea of using the Pine Cove facility for toll milling some of their mineralization from Queensway. So like us, I think Newfound Gold has the idea to look at maybe processing some feed early on as a test to get some cash flow. I think that there's great potential there at the Pine Cove facility. It's a big facility. It's a very strategic asset for us. We have like 13 years of tailings capacity that's fully permitted. We've got the mill that's expandable. There's lots of room. There's it's connected to the hydro system, and road access is in place. We've got a port there as well. We could actually ship material out or bring feed into the port. It's pretty rare to find an asset like that, so close to the water. There's so many different development options that are there. So, our angle with Newfound Gold is like, look, we've got this facility and it's available. We could look at toll milling some material that comes in from outside sources, from third parties, as another revenue driver for Maritime. Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's Queensway. How far is Queensway? I think I drove it before from Kings Point out to the Appleton Fault there. What is that, 2-hour drive, 3-hour drive, something like that?
Yeah, it's a good drive. It's about 260 kilometers, I believe, from the Pine Cove mill, but it's paved highway all the way, so it's not a bad drive. With those guys, I think they're going to look for certainly some very high grade feed coming out of their potential areas. So it makes good sense to look at processing it. And like I said before, brand new mills today, if you were to go and build, say, Pine Cove today fresh from scratch, you'd be well north of $100 million to build what's there now. It's very expensive. Inflation hasn't come down. Steel prices are still high. Energy rates are high. Labor, it's tough. It's a tough time to build anything brand new. So we looked at that acquisition as a great addition for us to pick up an asset that's there. It could be the hub for a long time for different deposits to come in and out. So it greatly de-risks our project and sets the stage for a lot of other opportunities.
Yeah, I keep quoting you, Garett. Like when we met at PDAC in 2022, you told me, guys, like we're getting proposals from contractors that are valid 24 hours, 48 hours right now. Like, yeah, have you talked to those contractors at all? Has that changed at least a little bit? Like, is there a bit of like let's call it like downward pressure on them as well? Like, what is the deflationary scenario, disinflationary scenario? Like, have you experienced that? Has that changed a little bit at least, or is it still as dramatic?
Yeah, it's thankfully it's changed a little bit, but not as fast as we like. I think when we did the feasibility study for Hammerdown, you're right. We did have quotes that were valid for 24 hours or a week. Very difficult time to pin down costs. And as a result of that, you're building in a lot of contingency into something like that. So costs, I think, for now are what we're seeing are lead times for major equipment starting to come down from when they were, which is great. Costs are still high. Lead times are better because they're making more things now and it's easier to get them. Like I said, labor rates, energy rates are still up there. Those won't change, I don't believe, anytime soon. But the availability of the things that you need, the reagents, the steel, the equipment, the trucks, tires, that's definitely improved. So that's at least that's getting better. So overall, it's a better time to build for sure. And it's a better time to do a new feasibility study. You'll get information you need a lot faster.
Garett, like to sort of sum up the conversation, can you like sort of answer in bullet points almost, like when we say clear path to production or clear path to cash flow, let's go down in bullet points without like a lot of explanation. What are some of the next steps to get to that point?
Yeah, no problem. That's easy. So look, we got to finish the permitting for Hammerdown. So permitting wise for Hammerdown, there are 2 steps left. There's the closure plan and the development plan. Those have been submitted. We're back and forth with the province. We're hoping to have those in our hands late this year, early next year. After we have that, we fully had permitted to go ahead and build Hammerdown. At the mill, we would have to amend the mill license to include Hammerdown. That's a pretty standard and simple thing to do. We do have to get the feasibility study updated next year, and then project financing. So we're looking at getting, project financing would be the very earliest could be next next summer, I would say. It takes a few months to get all that arranged. But like I said, we are looking at exploring around these mines first, trying to add additional resources to add on to the Hammerdown mine life. So there's some exploration that's going to have to happen ahead of that. But at the end of the day, Hammerdown is what it is. It's a very high grade open pit. It's not, 20-year mine life. It's a short infusion of very, very high grade ore through a mill that's going to generate a lot of cash. And that's what we want to use to grow the company from there. A lot of companies are looking at staging development projects. We have that ability, which is very, to your question about cash flow. How do we get to cash flow? How do we control dilution in our stock, right? We do have a lot of shares outstanding, so we would like to limit that. We have the ability, I believe, with a high-grade deposit at surface, an hour away down a paved road from an existing mill, it's fully permitted. So we're going to look at maybe starting up with a small, low capital scenario and grow into the larger project from there. We have that ability. There are other targets around as well that we're going to look at bringing in. So it's a real interesting kind of opportunity for Hammerdown and Maritime in general. We're a little different than other companies, that we have that ability actually to generate cash flow in the short term. We don't have to build a lot of things. We can contract out the mine and we can start up the mill pretty quick.
Garett, I think one important piece of the puzzle we haven't talked about at all yet is actually you, because you're an engineer. You're a mining engineer. You're not some dreamer CEO or geologist who wants to get his baby into production. Can you maybe, because I think it's important, can you just elaborate, like explain real quick your career path up to date?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in the business. Actually, my family had a sand and gravel quarry company growing up, so I grew up running equipment and doing all that. So I went to engineering school in Sudbury at Laurentian. I worked for Placer Dome Gold Company, my first job out of school. Red Lake and Timmins. So I did a lot of narrow vein mining with some open pit mining in Timmins. Worked as well in Fort McMurray for Suncor Energy. So I did experience moving 1.1 million tons a day. So I've seen mining narrow veins 4 feet wide, and then I've seen the other side where you're moving 1 million tons a day with 400-ton trucks. I was involved in Rainy River Resources early on with Ray Threlkeld. That company was eventually sold to New Gold. They ended up building the mine, so I think it's about 1,000 or 1,200 people working there today. And just before Maritime, I was consulting for about 3 years. I consulted on a narrow vein project in Northern Ireland with Dalradian Resources. I led the feasibility study on that one. That was acquired by Orion Resource Finance for about $500 million US. And then I got introduced to the Maritime story. And when I started looking at this one, we came up with the idea of an open pit connected to existing infrastructure that's nearby to generate cash flow. Didn't have to be a big mine, but it was an opportunity to start generating its own cash flow and growing from there. So I like this project a lot. I think it's got a lot of merits. It's in a great jurisdiction, great people around. Yeah, so we're close. We're getting close.
I'll say jokingly, but any regrets?
Any regrets?
Becoming CEO of a junior mining company, any regrets?
It'd be a lot easier if we had cash flow, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But it is, I think if you can find a project that you in a good jurisdiction, look, for us, that's one of our best selling points is Newfoundland. We have grade, and we have the ability to raise, the capital I think that we need. I always, go back to that 3-legged stool analogy, right? You have to have good grade, you have to be in a good jurisdiction with good people, and you have to have cash or the ability to raise cash. And I think we have all those right now. So we've spent the last couple of years just de-risking things. Like I said, if you're going to do this, you got to do it right. The drilling, tightening everything up, all the environmental work, the community work, permitting, and buying these mills and getting things ready. So, my statement, like you say, is near path or quick path to cash flow or clear path to cash flow. It's pretty clear and it's close. We'd be one of the few companies out there that could pull this off in a bad market.
No, absolutely fantastic job so far. It hasn't been easy. We've known each other for 3.5 years, so definitely
Yeah.
hasn't been easier. I'm underwater on my share position, but I see where this is headed. I still believe in the team personally, so I still believe in what you're doing, and you've been able to pull off. You've been able to make it to here by adding to the adding meat to the bone here. So congrats on that. Also, like, it's just side note, like the Minister of Mines retweeted some of my content as well, so it just shows you that there's quite of an engaged community out there in Newfoundland as well, which is great to see. So just interesting comment. Garrett,
Yeah.
I think we could put a bow around it. Like, what are the next steps, catalysts, that'll probably hit the market here?
Yeah. So uh, we've got some information coming out. I think catalyst wise on a couple of exploration targets that we want people to know about and why we like them and why we plan to go after them, and the value they could add to the overall story. I think there's some great targets out there that people may not be aware of. So we'll be talking about that more throughout the year and early next year. Final permitting that'll come for Hammerdown is kind of on deck as well. That's a big step. Getting your final closure plan and development plan approved for Hammerdown, I think it's going to be huge. That one will let us then look at options, right, for project financing in the future. There are, like I said, there's potential there to look at different deposits that could come into the feasibility as we update it. It's not going to happen overnight, but we want to go after these ones and put them in the story. Newfound Gold, I think, could be another catalyst in the future. We do have a good relationship with them. We are looking at toll milling opportunities. I think that there's, I'll highlight, and I'm certainly not forward looking onto anything here, but there's been a lot of activity in Newfoundland lately, right? You see Calibre picking up Marathon, Ateco buying Rambler. It's a great jurisdiction. It's the place to be, as far as I'm concerned. And we're always looking at opportunities wherever we can to add shareholder value. That's why we did these deals here recently with Signal to get the assets in place with Point Roos. And longer term, the vision is, like I always said, to get one good metallurgical hub set up and look at bringing feed in to process, shipping concentrate out. A lot of opportunities for that.
Fantastic. Awesome. Garrett, thanks so much for the intro and update as well. It's always good seeing you. Congratulations on the deals you've done, and of course, good luck, advancing them and getting to a point of cash flow, actually. So thanks so much.
Yep.
And everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this update from Garett Macdonald. He's President and CEO over at Maritime Resources. Keep in mind, I'm a shareholder, but I really like the team. I really like what they're doing there. They've added quite a bit of meat to the bone. Yes, share count has exploded over the last 2.5, 3 years as well. Trading at 4.5 cents. They're trading in the US and in Canada. Take a look at it personally. Like, I'm still a believer in the team mostly, and that they're doing the right thing. The jurisdiction is fantastic. I've said it before. The Minister of Mines retweets content and likes content that is being put out about the province. So it shows a lot of support in the area. So definitely an area I want to be in. And Garrett highlighted as well recently a $375 million deal for Marathon. Calibre coming in here, probably diversifying their country risk a little bit from the US and Nicaragua in particular. So I think that's a great diversifier. And anything else, we'll see how that develops. But definitely a great jurisdiction to be in. Again, I'm a shareholder. I'm staying a shareholder, and excited to see where this is going. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back with lots more here. Thank you so much.